Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode number 47 of Restitching the Tapestry. We are inching ever so closely to episode 50, and we are super excited about that. And we are really excited about tonight's episode because we have our dear friend Sherri Archer from the YouTube channel Sherri Makes Stuff joining us to talk about the art of journaling part 2. So it's going to be fun. We're going to be like Sherri's going to be showing off some artistic stuff, which I am particularly excited about, and we're going to have some good conversation about um, how significant journaling is for us. We're going to have Sherri talk a little bit about um, her history with journaling and art. So it's going to cover a lot of different bases. And we're going to, of course, recap a little bit from what we talked about from the last episode. So, first and foremost, how are both of you doing?
I'm good.
Sherri, you can go first.
Oh, okay. I'm like, I'm the guest. I'm gonna wait. I'll wait my turn. Thanks. I am very well. Thank you much, and thank you both for having me here on your channel. I appreciate this so much on your show and on your channel. I appreciate this so much, and this is very exciting.
And it means a lot that you're taking time out of your schedule to be here with us too. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
And Ari,
it's
how are
great.
you?
I'm great. I'm always glad to have another week here, and I'm glad to have a guest. We love having guests. It's always a special treat when we have someone special on the show. So I'm really excited, and I'm really excited that we're talking about journaling because it's always like a fun subject. So I'm like, I feel like a kid in a candy store, like I'm or a kid on Christmas. I'm like really excited, and I've been like we were in the pre, and I was just like super excited, and I just like I'm quietly like holding myself back. So I'm just like trying to remain calm. So, yes.
Truthfully, we could probably do an entire show about journaling itself because we love journaling that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, who knows? Maybe that's another idea we could run with. We'll see. Okay, so we have 6 viewers so far. We have Gloria here. Hello, Gloria. It's nice to meet
That's my
you.
mom. Hi, mom.
Hello, Mom. Welcome. We have Leo here. Leo, it's good to see you. And yes, we do have 3 people this time. That's always a surprise when it happens because it happens so rarely, right? Um, Before we get started with our topic tonight, I do want to read our show's mission statement just to overview what our goal for our show is ultimately. So many witness different atrocities, large or small, that fray the social fabric around us, and much of the time, many may feel powerless and know not how to address such things. This fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media because we are able to collectively share in trauma as it goes viral in real time. And often there are marginalized communities who are at the forefront of experiencing this trauma. So, our goal with this show is to have conversation about different topics that might help us develop a better understanding of these different things, develop an understanding of what we can do to fix those things. And often that involves talking about creative outlets, about art, about expression, okay? Because expression is one of those things that's often suppressed by powerful groups of people, right? Which, of course, brings us to having a conversation about journaling, because as we established in, I think it was in May that we did that, the first episode of our journaling conversation, we discussed how vulnerable requires of us to be in order to journal, right? Like, and it's usually something that's pretty private, that's not shared with people, although there are some situations where it is. But we've come to discover in our own lives that journaling has been a very important outlet for us when we have felt either silenced or felt misunderstood or misrepresented. Okay. So, that took me a little bit longer than I anticipated. What else is new? So
Al-
I can be a chatterbox. So
Also, if you experience some form of trauma, journaling helps you work through those traumas and helps you kind of process what you've been dealing with. It definitely helps with a lot of things that you're going through and helps you kind of just work through those problems.
Exactly. So looking back on our part 1 for the art of journaling, just to overview what we talked about. So Ari and I discussed at length our histories with journaling, how it shifted, how we've tried different modes of journaling, so on and so forth. We also talked about the different diverse forms of journaling there are out there, ranging from prompts that people enjoy using to examining like just different formats for journaling in general. Okay. And then of course we talked about a few of our own tips for creating a good journaling experience. Sorry, I forgot to put your computer in there. My partner just made an appearance. Hey.
Hey.
um, I was supposed to put his computer in the bedroom earlier because he's going to study, and I forgot to do that. So that's on me. But I digress. So we talked at length about our processes and like the different things that have worked for us. Okay, and how we've had to shift those things over the course of time, depending on the situation. So, I guess the one question that I have for all of us right now would be, what sort of journaling have you been doing recently? Ari, would you like to go first for this?
So I have a couple different kinds of journals. So I have this is my go-to journal, which is like my daily artist pages. So I have like regular journaling that I do, and it's got my to-do lists, and it's got like drawings and stickers and all sorts of stuff in it. And then I
I
have my
always love
question.
your journals are so like multimodal. I love that about them.
And then I have my question a day journal that I'm doing. And the other one that I was doing, I have the journal that I share with Donny. I was
That
doing
Donnie has not mailed back yet.
that Donny has not mailed back yet, that I was doing with him. Uh, but yeah, those are the 3 journals that I have currently going.
Sherri, how about you?
Very cool. Well, I'd like to, if I may, I'd like to comment on your journals, Ari. Like those are really great, and I love that your main journal, the first one that you brought up, is like a sketchbook. Like I love that because I feel like a lot of people think, oh, journaling, it means I just have to like write line after line after line and just like, dear diary, today I ate peanut butter. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people don't really know that you can open that up and it can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't just have to be writing. It can involve drawing. It can involve collage. It can involve paint. It can involve, coffee rings. It can involve like all kind, your life, right? Like it's a journaling of your life. It's a record of your life. And so, I appreciate the fact that you didn't, I always say, confine yourself into the psychological boundaries of lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
I always tell my students, don't buy line journals, buy, sketchbooks and use them how you will. If you need to draw lines in, then draw your own lines in, but don't go with those artificial lines that were imposed upon us by the man. So good for you for breaking from tradition and opening your vistas that way. Okay, so now you want to hear about my journals. So I have a couple. Who knows? Some of these are just ones I made. So you talked about the active journaling, kind of giving you that peace and giving you that sense of, centering and that sense of self, or at least that's what I was hearing you say. And for me, making journals also gives me that peace. Like the majority of the journals that I have here, and you're seeing the ones that look pretty on camera. I have some not as camera ready ones. There are probably 20 journals, not including the ones that I just left in my studio, most of which I've made over the course of the pandemic. And it's just been
That wow.
Yeah, it's just for me, this is another way to keep my hands busy when I'm not feeling in the good mental space to make art with a capital A. You know what I mean? Like making that art with a capital A can be kind of daunting and overwhelming and can kind of really press into your mental faculties. And when you're dealing with things like, oh, I don't know, a global pandemic, you can feel a little overwhelmed, right? So, so for me, just the act of making has really been helping. Currently, my main journal is this one. You can tell it's a journal. It says journal right on the cover.
That is so beautiful.
This is
gorgeous.
This is what I made. I just bought a vinyl cutter and I'm very excited about it. So I'm like, look at my beautiful vinyl cutter skills. And in it, so this is, again, now giving into the psychological boundaries of lines. This is made up of a variety of different papers. And this is primarily the kind of journaling that I make is made up of a bunch of old papers and new papers, and there's some book pages in here. And it's just this kind of free form place where I've been writing. I'm like, is that too personal? I don't know. Who knows? Like,
I'm gonna enlarge the screen so everybody can see it, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Pause and
like
zoom in.
like there's the texture looks so interesting.
Yeah. Delta College represent Fiber Club. So yeah, so there's all kinds of, there's some pictures and some lots and lots of writing, and the writing goes this way and it goes that way. This is me dealing with feeling sad and dealing with my depression that I'm dealing with. And then, going through some exercises that my therapist has given me. And it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of drawing Celtic knotwork because that was relaxing for a day. It's a little bit of, and there's all kinds of little hidey spots. I don't think I wrote in this one yet. There's all kinds of little flippy hidey spots where you can like tuck little notes in, or
your journal is goals. It's so amazing.
That is definite goals.
Yeah. So this is the one I'm about, I think, 3/5 of the way through it. I got 2 more signatures to go, but this is my current journal that I'm working on. There's this one, and then there's this one next to me, which is very similar. This one I made, or I've been working on as a celebration of the strong women in my life. And so it's full of all kinds of nonsense too. This is another book that I made. I mean, I guess I don't need to say that every time, right? And so this is
please do.
This is full of a bunch of pictures, and these are found family. These are found images. So I don't know who these people are, but I just loved, as I was mentioning to you, Donny, I'm into historical costuming and fashion. So I found all these great pictures of like these historical dresses and historical clothing. And I was like, what do I do with them? I was like, well, why don't I create a journal and make parallels to like some of the women in my family and some of the strong women that I was raised by. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Gloria. I'm looking at you, Mom. And there's a drawing of the dress I made for myself for New Year's 2020. So it's got, some pages that are out of like a storybook, some are collages that I've put together. And so this one doesn't have a lot of writing in it. It does have some kind of traditional journaling in it. But for me, this is more of a visual exploration, if that makes sense.
It's so pretty.
Thank you.
I think that's just so interesting. Like, allowing like the visual to have more meaning, and that's one thing that I really aspire in journaling now, because like I've seen your work and I've seen Ari's work, and I usually just write. I want to do more visual stuff too.
Shout out to my friend Darlinda. She's a burlesque dancer out of New York, and she is fabulous. So, and I'm still working on this one. So it's got, and I don't work front to back. I kind of skip around, because this is full of all kinds of, like, that's from a book from the 1930s. Like, it's full of all kinds of random stuff. So sometimes I'll just flip around until I find a page that looks like it needs my love for the day. This is from an old Mother Goose book. And I don't tend to tear apart books that are in good nick. So I only tear it apart if it's kind of falling apart, and then I'll harvest the pages. But any books that are like in good shape, then those I will, I might copy things out of them or whatever, or just use them as inspiration. This little girl hiding in here. So yeah, and there's some stitching. Because again, this is about strong women, and my grandmother's the one that taught me how to sew. So I have a little writing about her in here. There's some cards. My mom sends me cards quite frequently. I've got some of those tucked in here. I save them all. She probably thinks I don't read them, but I do. I have them all in here. So that's it. This is from a bag from a friend of mine. She went to London and bought me something nice and brought it back, and I saved the bag and collaged with it. So a little bit of everything. If you give me something and I think it's visual, it's probably going to go in a journal.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I can do more of that, but I kind of want to give somebody else a turn.
Okay, let me fix. Okay, there we go. I've not used that one feature yet, so I was like tinkering around with it. That like, how much time would you say you've put into that last journal you showed us?
That one, well, I mean, it's not really finished. So it's been several months that I've been working on it off and on. It's not like a straight through kind of thing. This one I've been working in this one for the last month, and that one probably a month or two that I've been working in it. I don't know, but just to make the book, like I can have a book like that made, like a blank. I think if I got one that's this one you can see how it's kind of doesn't have a whole lot in it. Like, so it's pretty blank on the inside. This is an old kid's book. And so there's like some cool paper, but there's not a whole lot of stuff in it. Like something like this I could have done in like a day. I could have this made in like a day or two. Probably 2 days with glue drying and stuff.
That is so exciting. Like I want to start doing this stuff. And I know that you've done some of this on your channel so far, and we'll be talking about some of your videos here shortly too. For mine, and this is just really quickly, what I've been doing, I actually just got these little journals from my friend Rhiannon. She found them, there were birds on them, and she thought they were cute because I love birds. And they are full of lined paper. So I'll probably be writing in these, but what I've been doing is I've been like writing notes for live streams in these, or like YouTube video notes, because I already have like a journal for every writing contingency. And then of course, I think I showed this one last time, but I recently bought this one. It's kind of, ooh. It looks like it looks very Pride-ish, so that's why I got it. And I've been wanting to, it's a sketchbook, and I've been putting in like cards and stuff that I've been getting from my gay uncle, who recently just reconnected with me. So it's just been, I don't know, I want to try branching out a little bit when it comes to journaling. I used to be a very artistic person when it came to like drawing and stuff, and I just stopped doing that. And my goal with this journal and with the journal that Ari and I are exchanging is to challenge myself to look outside of those lines, which, by the way, Sherri, I thought was very thought-provoking that you said. Like, I kind of had like one of those like moments, when you said that, because we don't really realize how we kind of limit ourselves in our own art forms, right? Sometimes we always assume that our art has to be art with a capital A. It has to be a large, elaborate project. It doesn't always have to be that way. Sometimes the most fulfilling art can come from the smaller things that we do every day, right? That just add up over time.
Right. And that could be some of the most meaningful stuff. Like, these, like, they might not make a big splash. You're not going to see them in a museum anywhere, but they are the most meaningful to me. And I feel like, if, I've given my books away from time to time, and they're the most meaningful gifts that I know how to give. You know what I mean? Like, I'm giving my time, I'm giving my thoughtfulness, and I'm giving my skill to you, you know what I mean? And I'm also giving you an avenue in which you can, express yourself. And so I'm also trying to give you the gift of creativity, right? And the gift of self-expression.
I love
That's
that.
amazing.
It's kind of like a personal museum, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I've always viewed journaling, because like it's like I very obsessively keep my journals. I have journals dating all the way back to like the early 2000s when I first started getting interested in it. And I like being able to look back at like, well, what was I doing on August 5th, 2002? You know, being super angsty probably, but you know, it's just interesting to see growth. It's interesting to see where we were, you know, at certain points in time. Ari, how about you? Like when it comes, like what fulfillment do you get out of journaling?
I like seeing my old journals and seeing what I was doing. But it's just like the act of like getting it out and just like doing it and just like having that catharsis of I made something. And sometimes I don't even look at them. I just like put them away and then they're gone. And so then later when I discover them, when I'm like cleaning out the boxes in my room, it's sort of like a little surprise. It's like a little magical, like, ooh, I found something. And it's this interesting artifact of my life. And it's sort of like, who was this person 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And I'm like, it's sort of like I rediscover who I was. And it's like, who was this person?
I love that you said I created this thing, right? Like we are making even the act of, taking a journal with lined paper that somebody else manufactured, you're still creating something that didn't exist before, right? You're still creating this document that wasn't a thing. It wasn't an object in the world. And you have transformed that lined paper into something, right? You've transformed it into your memories, into your dreams, into your hopes, into your thoughts, into your inner person. Like that's special and magical. You know what I mean? And that's wonderful. Like you said, that you kept these things and it's this wonderful memory. Like I just love that. That's so precious to me because it absolutely is, right? It's documenting our lives and documenting our experiences. And we live in a time where we're doing that a lot. You talked about social media, and we live in a time where it's much more democratic for people to be able to document their lives, for regular people to document their lives. But you think like 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, right? The only people whose lives were really documented in any kind of meaningful way were kings and queens and, wealthy people. Like, we can learn anything we want to about the Rockefellers. But if I want to learn about my great grandparents, right? Like that, a lot of that's lost to time, right? Because they were common folks. That's why the Little House on the Prairie books, that's why they've held strong, even though there's lots of racist stuff in there, even though they're problematic in a lot of ways. There's all the, manifest destiny stuff. And, her daughter edited them and she was a big, friend of Ayn Rand, you know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of problems in there with the books, but they've held strong and people still resonate with them because it's this story about everyday people, right? It's this record of these real people who lived. It's a fictionalized version of them, but it's still this record of these everyday people. Like how often does that happen where we have that record of what people like you and I were living, right? Like that's a special thing that we're doing when we're journaling our experiences. It's a thing that doesn't get done, I think, often enough.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I that really resonated with me the way you described that, and Ari, also the way you were referring to like rediscovering journals, because I've always viewed journaling, and I mentioned this in the last episode that we did about this topic. Like my writing is an extension of me. It's an extension of my existence, and in my own trauma history, I guess you could say, like I've always been made to feel like I should erase myself in some fashion. So I've kind of viewed journaling and writing in general as putting little small tidbits of myself out there that won't be erased, no matter how much I might feel the need to erase myself, or no matter how much other people in my life might do that, you know. Of course, that doesn't happen as often as it used to, obviously, because I've learned how to stand up for myself and how to, you know, call things out like that. But that's why I really romanticized journaling at one point in time, is because I've always viewed it as being an extension of me. And it just added to my existence, if that makes sense. So
adds to it and amplifies, right, your voice in a way where maybe in your day-to-day life it doesn't feel comfortable to do, but here this is a safe place where you can amplify yourself and amplify your voice without shame or judgment. We were talking about that a little bit before the stream started, right? Like, you know, that idea of how we have judgment and shame in our everyday language, we don't even think about it, right? This is a way for us to exist in a big way, but without that shame or judgment, without that, you know, voice looking over our shoulder, and, you know, because it's a safe place for us.
Right.
Even though I just showed the whole world my pages, but, you know, whatever.
We did that in our last episode. So I'm going to go back through the comments that we've been getting, because I want to make sure that I'm acknowledging those too. Let's see. Leo says, I want to be able to do a trauma journal. I need to figure out how to do it, though, so it's not triggering and only cathartic. That's a really good point to make. I have a trauma journal that I started once I started therapy about a year ago. And my therapist told me that even if it's triggering, just allow yourself the time to process it. Like, if you feel triggered and you need to move away from it for a while, then do so. Don't feel the need to pressure yourself into writing something that's triggering for you if you need to pace yourself. And now, because I've learned how to do that a little bit more, because I've been a little bit more patient with myself, it's been more cathartic for me, you know, to use the trauma journal. So, and Leo also mentions I picked up some India ink pens for my journals too. I need to get on that still.
Have you tried writing with a fountain pen?
Yes.
Will change your life. Ari, if you're not on that train, girl, do it. It will change your life. I'm just saying.
Iconic.
I want to, but like I feel like I'm a messy person, so I may make a mess everywhere, and like just there'll be just big splotches all over my journal.
Well, a lot of the modern, you know, it depends on the pen that you get, but a lot of the modern pens take cartridges that you just toss when you're done with it, and you just buy a new cartridge. You don't have to refill it the old-fashioned way by sucking the ink up. And so there's still a chance, like when you're changing that cartridge out, that some might bleed a little bit. But A, it's water-soluble ink, so, you know, you can wash it away as long as you don't get it on fabric and stuff. But B, you know, it's a much cleaner, like our grandpa's kind of fountain pens, unless you're into the old fountain pens. Our grandpa's kind of fountain pens are not the same thing as like if you go to Staples tomorrow and you buy a Pentel fountain pen. You know what I mean? They use them regularly in grammar school in England. Like, this is what students use, is fountain pens. They don't use like indelible ink pens like we use. They think it's weird that we use ballpoint pens. So it's just kind of I think it's kind of a North American thing, this obsession we have with ballpoint pens. As far as I understand that Europe and England quite a bit use fountain pens still to this day. So I don't know. Just
I use the Pilot G2.
Those are nice.
That's my go-to pen.
Yeah, no, those are a nice writing pen.
I have those too. I use green because green is one of my favorite colors. Lex is here, one of my favorite human beings in the universe, with a quote that you've said. I love it. It's good to see you, Lex. And your mom says, who can read her writing? And probably when you were showing off your journal. And Leo,
I learned it from watching you, Mom. I learned it from watching you.
Leo complimented your journal, saying that he's definitely getting a River Song / Doctor Who vibe from it. I absolutely love that. Yes.
Thank you, Leo.
And Leo also says, I've written with glass dip pens. I've never done that before. Like,
Those are very cool. Yeah. Easier, I think, to control than a regular dip pen, I think. Would you agree with that, Leo? I think it's much easier. Like a regular dip pen is fun, but you are more likely to get the splotches, I think. But a fountain pen is different than a dip pen. It's different ink and it's a different writing experience. So I don't want to confuse the two. But yeah, those dip pens are the glass dip pens. I prefer those for drawing more than for writing for me. But the glass dip pens, I think, are a little bit easier to control the flow of the ink than it is with a standard dip pen.
I definitely need to check those out because I would really love to experiment with that. So, all right, Sherri, we are on to your segment now where you're going to talk about what you do a little bit more and your history with all of it too. Leo did confirm, though, that they are a lot easier, the glass dip pens. They hold more ink. And then we have Panda Alsatian here. I hope I pronounced that correctly. If I didn't, I apologize. So, Sherri, describe your history in art and journaling. Like, when did these two things converge? Like, when did you first start to realize, like, I can make these journals. I can infuse like my artistic energy into the appearance of these. When did that begin?
So actually, as an undergrad in college, I took a paper making class, and about the middle of it, she taught us how to bind books on some kind of simple Coptic book binding and Japanese stab binding. And that was it. I was just done for. I was like, this is the best thing ever. Like, I can't believe I learned how to make a book, right? Like, who doesn't love books? A, and I just learned how to make them. B, like, I'm kind of the coolest person I know right now. So that just sunk it for me. I was just done after that. And so I just started like getting books and just like reading all the books I could find on how do I do this kind of binding? How do I do that kind of binding? How can I perfect? And so this was in kind of the early 2000s. And so then maybe, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, for some reason, it just occurred to me that YouTube was a thing. I'm old and, I just realized that the internet exists. And so I just started watching all these YouTube videos, and there's a whole community of these people out there that make these gorgeous journals. And I was just like flummoxed, absolutely flummoxed. I was just like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I can't believe this is a whole universe. And so I just started absorbing all this content and just like, oh, teach me more things. And so I was taught traditional bookbinding methods, and then they do things that are called junk journals, which when I was in college, we just called them art journals. But it's like this whole thing where you use all the mixed different pages and all this kind of stuff, very similar to what I'm doing. And so I'm like looking, I have my first, I don't know, it's here somewhere. I have my first journal that I made when I was in college. I have it here somewhere. So anyway, so it was just like, it just became like this marriage of things. You know what I mean? Where I was just like, this is like, I don't know, it just came so naturally to me. It was like falling off a log. And so when I was in grad school, I started off a painter, and I was just like, why am I fighting uphill? Painting always seemed like this club that I couldn't quite figure out the secret handshake to. So I finally was like, you know what? Why don't I just float downhill? And I got into fiber arts and never looked back. So
nice.
Did I answer your question?
That's so yes, you did. That was a great answer. It's interesting to see like when these things spark for all of us, because again, it's kind of like looking back at that history, understanding like how we grow as artists too, that, really matters.
Yeah. And I'd always kind of journaled, like I'd always written journals and kept diaries, but I was never very good at it. Like I couldn't like do, September 21st, it was a cold and rainy day. Like I could never do the Dear Diary kind of stuff, and I could never really stick with it and stick with the routine. I'm kind of all over the place. And so that's why I said the beauty behind these art journals is I can move to the end of the book and decide, oh, I've got this little journaling card in here. I can just write something really quick on it, tuck it away, and that's my journaling for the day. I don't have to commit to a whole page, or I don't have to commit to a whole section of the book. I can just do something little, or I can add a picture in, or I can do a collage, or I can paint, or I can experiment with markers. Like it just has opened up so many other possibilities than just, not that there's anything wrong with standard journals. Those have worked for years for lots and lots of people. Just for the way my brain works, I could just never quite focus in on them enough. So this was my savior.
Well, I think that's an excellent point that you made too, because I mean, and I'm approaching this from the perspective of a writer, because like regardless what art form you're using, like we always have like schools of thought trying to dictate to us, well, this is how this
Mm-hmm.
art should be, this is how this formatting should be. I think
Right.
it's refreshing to see what you do and to also see what Ari does, because you both subvert that notion of like, well, for journaling to be journaling, it needs to look like this. For art to be art, it needs to look like this. That's one goal that I aspire for when it comes to poetry, because like everybody expects poetry to be Shakespearean sonnets or Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. And it's like, no, like poetry is just as diverse as any other art form. It does not have to conform to these little boxes that we want to place them in. And heaven forbid I ever see anybody try to shame other people for doing that, because that's out there. Like there are a lot of people who will actively shame artists and writers for trying to, create styles or to do something that they find fulfilling that might be different.
Yeah. For me too, like I've always been tied into the world of craft. Like I said, I told you earlier, my mom or my grandmother taught me how to sew when I was very young. It was kind of a let's keep Sherri busy because I wasn't a running, jumping, climbing trees kid. So it's like let's keep Sherri busy over in the corner and give her something to do. And she was a sewer, so she would give me little bits of fabric to play with and stuff. And in the art world, art with a capital A lot of times fiber arts and even clay work and anything that kind of traditionally falls into women's art and women's work is not taken seriously at all. So that's
True.
another reason why I've kind of owned it and like to have taken a deep dive into fiber arts and have made that my medium, because it absolutely is right, a valid art form. I look at all of these tapestries and crochet pieces and bits of work that women have done for years, right? Like fabric is what clothes us. You wear special clothes when you get married. You wear special clothes when you die, when you're born, right? You wear special fabrics and special materials, right? If somebody makes a quilt for you and gives it to you, it becomes a special object that you keep your entire life. Like there's something about textiles and fibers that is just warm and welcoming and tactile and knowable, right, on a very human level. And to me, like that, it's such a shame that it gets downplayed in the art world and it's not often taken very seriously as an art form. And it's something I fight against all the time. And a lot of my art with a capital A talks about that and deals with a lot of those issues, and that fight between art and craft and what the difference is.
I think the reason why they don't take it seriously is because it has to do with patriarchal order. It's because
Mm-hmm.
it's like art with an A, it's like the painting has to do with men traditionally went into painting and they studied in studios and they studied under male artists and they became artists. And so it's traditionally was men became artists and they studied under male
Sure.
artists, and it was just this hierarchy order. And women, well, they stayed at home and they became housewives. And so, oh yeah, they did this stuff, but it was more for the
Mm-hmm.
upkeep of the home.
Yeah, you
Mhm.
absolutely hit the nail on the head. And this is, I mean, we could do a whole other hour on this. And take my one of my classes at Saginaw Valley, because I do do a whole hour on this. And why don't we see women artists? Before Artemisia Gentileschi in the 16th century. Why don't we have any genius women artists? Where are all the female voices? And that's a lot of it, is because it absolutely is a patriarchal system. Not only do you have male artists, but the patrons of the arts historically have always been white European or white males of European descent. And so you see this one voice over and over and over again because those are the people in power. So those are the ones paying for the commissions. And so they wanted to see powerful men that looked like them, right? Represented in art. And so, or sexy naked women. Like those are your choices. And so that's what you see in art quite a bit. My partner just came home and my dog may skitter through loudly. So I apologize in advance for that.
That's okay.
So anyway, I just heard the screen door close. I'm like, uh-oh. So anyway, yeah, so that you're absolutely right though. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. And so that's why quote unquote women's art isn't taken seriously. You know, during the Renaissance of the 15th century, it did become fashionable for middle class ladies to learn how to paint, but that was just to make you a more suitable housewife, right? That showed that you were cultured and educated and but very few women were able to break through that and have a career as an artist because you were still expected to keep up the housework and keep up and bear children and, you know, all that kind of good traditional women's work kind of stuff. And so, yeah, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. All right. Absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. We could do a whole nother episode about that topic. There's another idea for us, I suppose, right? I love it. So, okay. So you've kind of talked a little bit about your creative process when it comes to creating these journals that you were just showcasing, right? So, but I want you to describe this creative process from start to finish. Like, how does the idea begin? Like, do you just see these books that are like kind of decaying and you want to preserve them? Or is this just like an amalgamation of like, I have this really cool idea, I have this image in my mind, this is what I want to do with this journal? How does that process work?
It's kind of a combination of things. You know, there's not any one way that I go about making it. Sometimes I'll be inspired by something I've seen out in the world. Like I might, you know, see an old illuminated manuscript, or, you know, a friend of mine has an old Bible that he wants me to restore for him. And the cover on it is just gorgeous. It's carved wood covered in leather. And I was just like, oh, 10 ideas just came into my head just by looking at that cover. You know what I mean? So it really comes from all over the place. And I try not to limit myself, or I try, not saying I do it successfully, but I try not to limit to myself to just books, either for, you know, inspiration, like what other things in the world could look like books or could become a book cover. You know, what if I took an old painting from the thrift store and cut it apart and turned it into a book cover? You know, what if I found an old silk dress and I used some of the beads and some of the buttons, you know, for the pages? Why do the pages have to be paper? Why can't they be fabric? Right. So I try to, it becomes that game, right? You ever see like the memes, you know, all the things in the world that kind of look like a face, right? Like when you look at them, it kind of becomes like that, right? You kind of do that creative thing where you're just like, okay, well, what else could this be? Right. You know, how else could I turn this into something? And so it really becomes, I will just, when I'm making books, particularly, again, it's usually just a need to get in my studio and work. And I just need to move my hands and I just need to get my hands going. And so I'll just go in there and I'll just kind of, if I'm not already inspired by something I've seen out in the world, I'll just start to go through what I've got. And I've got a lot of stuff, but I'll just start to go through like, what are some old book covers that I could recycle? Or what's some paper that I have laying around? You know, am I out of tea stain paper? Well, maybe I need to get some copy paper, start staining the paper. Maybe that will get me going. Sometimes I'll start by doing eco prints, which is doing prints of plants and using the natural dyes of plants. And this one also has synthetic dyes to kind of dye the pages of the paper. Maybe I want to do a set of eco prints and I'll start there and kind of see where that takes me. That's how this book was born, was just by a bunch of eco printed paper that I had laying around. You know, so it's really kind of, I don't know, it's kind of all over the place, but it usually starts with just needing to work and just needing to move my hands. And I just kind of, I don't know, I go in my studio. I think I start with the pages before I start with the cover. Usually I let the cover, I'll think about the cover, like what do I want the cover to look like? And I'll start building the signatures up first. I'll start building up the pages and the body of the book first. And I'll kind of like, what paper do I have available? You know, what do I want the interior to look like? Once that starts to kind of formulate itself, okay, what kind of book is this? Is this going to be more of an artsy picture kind of collage style book? Is this going to be more for writing in? I've got one of these that's almost completely just writing paper. It's just, you know, waiting for somebody to come along and journal in it. I don't even remember. No, I had them all laid out and then talking. Like this one is all paintings. It's all these little mini paintings that I've done. The whole book.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
So, not at all. I mean, I guess I could paste some stuff in there and write, but it's mostly just these little paintings that I've done, beads on the spine. So it really, and it starts to kind of come together as I kind of build it as I go. I don't know if that's a good explanation. Oh, this is the one I was thinking of.
Oh, that's a great explanation. I like that you don't limit yourself to one process necessarily.
Like this one's all just kind of blank paper, so could be treated like a more traditional journal. All lace and paper, different kinds of paper, but just blank paper. So a little more of a traditional journal kind of idea.
I love that. I love that they are very much tactile, like just that tactile experience too. That's so.
I love that they're all
that's
different.
so unique.
Yeah, they are all different. They all have their own personality. Thank you for that, Ari. And yeah, they are all very tactile. I mean, I want people to touch my art. You know what I mean? I want people to feel permission to touch them and to want to touch them and go through them and page through them. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because when it comes to art, a lot of the time, like we are forbidden from touching art. We are forbidden from having that personal access to it. So I think that's very unique. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very empowering too, in a way.
It is very empowering. And now that you mentioned that, like that was a discussion I had before I took that class where I learned bookbinding. I had done some prints on fabric. I just kind of figured out how to do it, and I'd started to do some prints, and I'd started quilting them and doing all these things with them. And I brought them to my instructor at the time when I was a student at Delta many, many moons ago. I brought them to my instructor, and I was like, I don't know what to do with these. And she was like, maybe you could turn them into a book. She's like, I have a friend who's a book artist, and, and there's a very intimate moment where you just sit down with this book and you just kind of page through it, and it's just you and that piece of work. And I think that always, and I didn't know how to do it at the time. I didn't quite know what that looked like, but that idea always stuck with me. So thank you for saying that, because you're absolutely right. Like there is that intimate moment that you have with a book where it's just you and that book. Even if you're reading somebody's book for the first time, right? It's just you and that story. Even if it sold millions of copies, there's still that, now in YouTube world, we call it a parasocial relationship. But don't you kind of get that, right? With the stories that you read?
Oh, yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like I get that a lot. Like when I'm reading collections of poems too, like there will just be like this intimacy about it that really makes you not only feel close to the piece itself, but also to the person who produced it. So
yeah,
I am nerding out.
I love it.
So do you ever have people request commissions?
I've not actually sold the books yet, because again, this is a thing that I've been doing to kind of keep my hands busy. And it's always, before. So again, a lot of these I made during the COVID pandemic, because I just needed to create, but the creative spark for art with a capital A wasn't coming to me. So I just started to produce all these books. Before that, it was just kind of a one-off. Whenever I needed a journal, I would make another book for myself. And I found it. This is the OG. This is the first book I ever made for myself in college, way back when I was an undergrad.
Wow.
So I had to rebind it. So this is new, but yeah, this is my OG.
That is astonishing.
I knew you'd love it because I have the bird, but it's vintage fabric, and it's a lot of righty space. But so I've not had a book commissioned yet. I was the costume director for the Michigan Renaissance Festival, and that kept me very, very busy with commissions for a very long time. I did that job for almost a decade. I'm not in that position anymore, but I did that job for almost a decade, and that kept me super busy with commissions. So honestly, most of the work I've sold over the last 10 years were 16th century costumes, 16th century clothing. But I'm thinking I'm starting to get a little overrun. So there may be an Etsy store in my future. And I'm definitely open to taking commissions. I'm very definitely open to creating these for people who are interested in my books. Hint, hint.
Yeah, like yes. I am definitely interested. So, like, whenever,
Yes,
if you ever end
please.
up doing that, yeah, if you ever end up doing that and opening an Etsy store, just let us know and we'd be happy to, like, we could even do an episode about that. We could, like, share it around, so on and so forth. So, Leo actually has a question for you. Leo asks, do you use archival quality paper, like acid free?
That's an excellent question, Leo, and thank you for asking that. So, yes and no. Again, it depends on the book. So some of these are more of a there was more thought put to that, and it was more acid free. And in general, yes, but some of the processes that I've done to the paper isn't necessarily archival quality, if that makes sense. So some of the distressing and some of the processes that the paper, so the paper itself in general, yes, unless it's an old vintage paper, because they're kind of a mix of things. So again, yes and no, and that's kind of the nature of these books. Anybody that makes these books is kind of the nature of them. So are they going to last 200 years? Some of it will. Not a lot of, not all of it will. It's very unlikely. Now, if that was something that you needed, if that was something that you were interested in, then that's absolutely something that I could do for you. I absolutely could make it archival quality if that was a need. Again, these have all been made so far just to kind of keep me going and keep me making, and to just for my own purposes and my own needs. But if somebody was interested in buying one or wanted me to create one for them, then that's absolutely something that I could do for you. Like, and you saying that is like hashtag triggered. Like, now my painting instructor is like, from undergrad, is like going in my head, like, archival, make sure it lasts 200 years. So
I love it. um, so, okay, so your YouTube channel obviously is Sherri Makes Stuff, and I'm going to put a link in the comments here so everybody can go subscribe to your channel. The link is coming from a different one of my YouTube channels that I'm using, because whenever I use my same YouTube channel to post in the chat, it messes it up. So it'll pop up here in just a second. But I would definitely recommend everyone go subscribe and show Sherri some support over there. So let's talk a little bit more about the YouTube side of things. So, like, obviously YouTube has allowed you to visually showcase your artistic processes and what you are capable of doing. So, and you've already mentioned that YouTube, like pursuing YouTube, has been a more recent decision that you've made. Can you talk a bit more about what went into your decision to come onto YouTube? And can you talk a bit more about the different types of things that you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I was a costume director for a very long time. And during rehearsal processes, the time that I was given to kind of go over costuming bits was being truncated. And, I mean, there's only so many hours during a rehearsal process. So these things happen. And so I just kind of had this aha moment where I was like, you know what, I can deliver this stuff in a digital way. Like, not all of this stuff do I need to say to people in person. And also, like, if I'm going to show you a process, it's easier if I'm in my studio anyway, right? Than I am trying to explain something or draw it out for you, in an abstract sense. So it occurred to me to start doing tutorials. So that's largely what I have up, is sewing tutorials. I do have a couple of tutorials, or a couple of kind of flip throughs where I flip through a couple of my books on YouTube on my channel. And I also have a long form tutorial where I go through the eco dyeing process. So how I dyed that paper, if that's something you're interested in, with the plant forms. I have that video up as well. And so now that I'm no longer a costume director, it's been kind of occurring to me, like, now I can kind of refocus my channel, and I can kind of refocus on other things that I like to do. And I don't necessarily have to keep it to sewing. So I'm really open to suggestion. A lot of the videos that I have up right now were requests, can you show me how to do this? Can you show me how to do that? And so I'm very much open to requests, and I love, explaining things to people and, teaching people how to do things. So if there's anything anybody ever wanted to see, if for example, if you and your viewers were interested in watching me, start to finish, just go through a book, it's absolutely, a series that I could do.
That's what I
I'm all
want
in
to see,
favor of
is
that.
learn how to bind a book, because I don't know how to bind books, and I really want to learn how to do at least like a simple book binding, because I'm very interested in that.
Same
Cool.
here.
Absolutely something that we could do. And there's
That's
all
gonna be
kinds
really
of different binding techniques too. So there's a lot, there's very, very simple ways that you can bind books. And there's very, very, as Leo was saying, very, keep it archival, keep it, traditional, keep it, you can get very complicated with it as well. So there's everything in between. You can just take some paper and staple it in the middle, boom, you got a book, right? That's a very simple, it's a binding technique though, right? Like we all seen, books that were created that way, like simple binding
It's
technique.
the only binding I've ever done.
It's functional.
But like that's so, like, I think that's a great series idea on your channel. And like just based on our conversation here, like you like having the conversation about the difference between archival and traditional, and conversation about like how patriarchy has kind of like limited art for large groups of people. Like I think those would be really interesting conversations for you to do on your channel as well. Like maybe like little educational tidbits, that really kind of help people realize that art itself has a very complex history, right? And that history has affected all of us in a variety of different ways, and it influences how we produce what we produce.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. For those of you who don't know, Donny and I work together, and Lex. Hey, Lex. We all work together at Delta, and I teach art history. And so that's very much something that I bake into my classes, is, why don't we see, LGBTQIA voices until after 1969? Why don't we see, openly, queer people in the art historical record? Why don't we see little hints here and there? Why don't we see a lot of women, before the 16th century? Why don't we see like, where are all these voices coming from? And I always try to include that intersectionality into those classes. And so, yeah, I think that could be an interesting series, kind of a craft with me, if you will. And, let's talk about the history of art at the same time. The history.
That's great. That's a good idea. So now, okay, so because we talked a little bit about this before, like when we were in the back room prior to the stream. I'm going to make you talk about it again, of course. But what are your goals and aspirations as an artist / journaler / YouTuber? Like, what do you envision yourself doing moving forward?
Again, as I kind of said, like that's kind of where I'm at right now, is kind of, trying to find that direction, and how do I want, that's why I named the channel Sherri Makes Stuff, not Sherri Sews or Sherri Makes Books, or I didn't want to keep myself to any one thing, because at the core of my being, I'm a fiber artist. And so that doesn't have anything to do with cereal. It's, all different kinds of fibers. So I weave, I sew, I spin, I make books, I, do a variety of different things. And I would like to be able to do a lot of these different processes. And so I feel like now that I'm not in that box of costume director, and it very much felt like a box, I'm like, don't pity me that I don't have that job anymore. That was totally a choice. And so, it's me needing to move forward, because being stuck in that very small box for a very long period of time was just starting to become stifling, and it was starting to burn me out. And it's just terrible when you don't do what you love anymore, right? Like when it when it becomes a job, it's just too much. So so that's kind of where I'm at, is trying to find this new direction. And I love that idea of doing these kind of this craft with me series, and creating a book maybe from start, and talking about those things. But that's I guess that's kind of my future.
I love that.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Another social media outlet to think about. I don't know if you're on TikTok at all, but we just had an episode talking about TikTok a couple of weeks ago. But like I feel like the visual aspect of you like doing a lot of this art, that would gain a lot of traction on TikTok, especially because it's so like people are very invested in process related things on TikTok, if that makes sense. So that could be also like as you continue to grow your YouTube channel, and if you say like end up opening up an Etsy store, like that might be a good place to also showcase your work and continue building that audience, if that makes sense. So
yeah, something I'll have to look into.
It's true. The youngins love a good Etsy shop.
TikTok.
A good time. Is that what the kids are doing these days?
It's true.
Because I don't know. I haven't been
pretty much.
I haven't been one of the kids since the Carter administration, so I don't know. I couldn't tell you. So
my partner, he praises, he kind of like brags about like, well, I'm always up to date on things that are trendy, and he's always like trying to get me like, Donny, this is what's done now. Like, what are you doing? So I like look to him. I'm like, is this trendy now? Like, what's going on?
Right.
So what advice? Okay, so we're obviously at the end here, right? And this is going to be a question that I ask both of you. Okay, what advice do you have for individuals who are aspiring artists / writers? Ari.
Oh,
I'm gonna put you on the spot first.
I thought we would have the guest go first.
I'm switching it up.
Okay, so my advice is if you have an idea, go for it. Don't wait. Because you'll lose the idea, and then it'll just you'll forget about it, and then you'll never stick with it. So if you have an idea to do something, just go with it. Do it as soon as you think about it, and stick with it. If it doesn't turn out exactly the way you think about it, that's fine. You're still creating something, and even if it's not as what you think about, it still can be good, and it can still be great.
I love that. Yeah. Sherri, how about you?
I agree entirely. Like my biggest advice is don't worry too much about supposed to. If any of my students are paying attention to this, don't listen. But don't pay too much attention to supposed to. I mean, art is very subjective. There's a lot of subjectivity to it. There are some objective things that we do look for in the art world. So now I got to put on my art teacher hat for a second, right? Like there are some objective things that we look for in the art world. But if you are not trying to appeal to the official art world, if you're not trying to get gallery representation, if you're not trying to get into museums, if you're not trying to, sell to the established art establishment, if you will, then just do what's in your heart and just keep doing it, and don't worry about supposed to, and don't worry about, what people say and what people have already done. Just do your authentic voice and your authentic, and just search for that, right? Search for your authentic voice and search for, what feels good and what feels right and what feels like floating downstream. Don't make it, again, unless you're trying to work in, the art field, art with a capital A, unless you're trying to get that gallery representation. And even then, this advice still holds true. Just then you do want to think about what's happened before you, because you don't want to retread old paths, and you don't want to, you don't want to, keep reiterating what's already been done. But if that's not what your goal is, then just do stuff. Just get some stuff out, get some glue, get some crayons, get some paper, and just make stuff. Like that little plug I put in there at the end for my channel.
I love that. Oh, that is perfect. It's perfect. This has been so fun. Like this like is probably going to be one of my favorite episodes that we've done. So
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I couldn't think of two individuals I would rather have this conversation with because you were both are two of my favorite people in the universe. So everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. Sherri, thank you for being our wonderful guest. Go subscribe to Sherri Makes Stuff. Ari, thank you for being my wonderful co-host as always. Go subscribe to Ari's channel, Strange Nothings. And if for some reason you're here and you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, what are you doing? Like get right on that. Like there's a subscribe button right below. If you are going back and watching through this because you couldn't tune into the stream, please don't hesitate to leave a question or a comment down in the comment section because we will be going through and responding to them as they arise. Okay. So we love you all. We will see you not this coming Thursday because I have a reading that night, but the following Thursday. Love you all, and we will see you the following Thursday after that. Have a good night.
Night.
Bye.